Sion Sono's Suicide Club solidifies its position within the line of films significant to Japanese film history, as it enables us to understand the socio-political anxieties within the consciousness of post-bubble economy Japan and the lost decade. In the year 1985, Japan experienced an economic boom known as the Japanese bubble economy. The problem with this economy, however, was that it came with several issues that would ultimately cripple the Japanese economy for upwards of 3 decades. Inflation and credit expansion were rampant due to the uncontrolled money supply of the Bank of Japan. Asset prices rose to the point that, at the market peak in 1991, all the land in Japan, a country the size of California, was worth about $18 trillion, or almost 4 times the value of all property in the United States at the time. This market high marked the end of the economic bubble, and in December of 1989, Japan's economy collapsed into a recession. This era was labeled as the Lost Decade, encompassing the socio-political hardships faced by Japan for the following 10 years. Towards the turn of the millennium, Japan saw a surge in suicide rates related to financial instability. In 1999, the National Police Agency stated that 33,048 people killed themselves. Police estimated that a lack of money was a factor in about 1 in 3 suicides. While appearing to be a young, cute J-pop group, the fictional band within the film called Desert, or Desert, or Deseret, highlights Sono's discontent with consumerism. Their catchy, live performances are sprinkled throughout the film's runtime, and it becomes evident that they have a significant enough impact to be labeled as a fad. Desert's songs are played diegetically through radios and television sets, while also being the ringtone for every single cell phone. Sono highlights his issues with fads and consumerist culture through the influence of the band, as they utilize subliminal messaging to convince people that suicide is a perfectly viable method of absolving the sins that you have committed. It is not often that young girl groups discuss the topic of death in cutesy love songs about sending letters or emails. The song Mail Me mimics the messaging of a suicide note, expressing that if the sender has nothing to say, then the receiver has nothing left to live for and is content with killing themselves. The song Jigsaw Puzzle, that plays later in the film, sends a similar message, that if you cannot find a place to fit in, make it fit. Naturally, a puzzle piece does not just fit, you have to find a place for it to fit. But what Desert solidifies is that you can make the piece, aka you, fit by committing suicide. Sono makes this connection between fads and suicide evident in the Kuroda family. The detective gathers his family for a family meeting, presumably for a discussion regarding the suicides, but is dissuaded from doing so as Desert captivates the family from the moment they enter the room. A later scene makes the connection to American consumer culture, as his family, a nuclear family consisting of father, mother, son and daughter, gather together to watch television while they have dinner. Kuroda's family's fate is ultimately sealed when he returns home for the last time and discovers that his family's infatuation with desert has influenced them to commit suicide, expressing Sono's belief that fads are inherently destructive. This destructiveness resulting from the fad-like influence of desert is a vital element in Suicide Club, as the film serves as a representation of the general socio-political state and general consciousness of Japan during the lost decade. In a typical screenwriting process, common practice is to utilize the first 10 to 15 minutes or so of the script to identify a few things. Establish a protagonist or lead. Establish goals for this protagonist. What is the tone? The genre? What world do these things exist in? Similarly to how the film avoids explicitly delivering an answer to the sporadic suicides, Sono only gives the viewer a setting, that of contemporary Japan, and a tone. A depressing and nihilistic tone. The film never settles on a specific genre. It immediately switches from satire to horror, from thriller to crime film. Potential protagonists we meet are killed off with the same bravado as characters do themselves, and the only goal people have is to kill themselves in order to finally be at peace. Despite these supposed flaws, Sono utilizes the lacking narrative structure to amplify the themes of existentialism, nihilism, and identity. He also invokes Julia Kristeva's definition of the abject, which refers to the fear of a societal concept breaking down and reminds us of our own materiality, which he uses to catalyze the impending threat of a decaying society. The opening sequence of the film depicts 54 schoolgirls throwing themselves in front of a train as if it were a game of hopscotch, whilst waves of sanguine blood surge onto the station platform. The ensuing chaos is cut together in a montage of oblivious civilians being sprayed with blood, windows shattering, and confused screaming. This scene's main goal is to shock the viewer and to convey the decay of a society. It represents the abject in that it reminds the viewer of their own materiality, that anyone at a given point could kill themselves by jumping in front of a train. Mass suicide, given its conditions, already conflicts with the structure of society, yet when combining it with a location dedicated to society, in this example mass transit, it shatters the mind and can greatly contribute to a nihilistic worldview. About an hour later into the film, Sono further illustrates this shattered image of reality. All over Tokyo, people are killing themselves, and the seeds of the ambiguous suicide club have taken root. The housewife cutting her hand, the man stabbing his own neck, the women hanging themselves, and a child even climbing into the oven all remind the viewer that their own demise is inescapable. Scholars Robert Davis and Ricardo de los Rios argue in their essay, From Hollywood to Tokyo, Resolving Attention in Contemporary Narrative Film, that unlike the Hollywood film, which develops a minimum of plot points, Suicide Club piles one outrageous narrative beat on top of another, without concern for paying any of them off or otherwise tying up loose ends. The film postulates an audience that will forego closure for a complex, open-ended Dionysian stream of content. While this is inherently true, I think that it is precisely the lack of plot points and narrative beats that contribute to the film's significance. Sono constructs a window to allow the viewer to see into the Japanese consciousness during the period of the lost decade, while also representing the increased rate of suicide in relation to financial hardship.